lead from the construction sector accord. Now, for a start, Annie Day, like I say, is the environmental manager for Naylor Love. Now, we're going to be joined by some of my fellow colleagues from the Accord to discuss this waste trial from an environmental, people, procurement and innovation perspective. So we're going to start off with some background about waste and why we're so interested in it in construction. And then we're going to ask some questions of Annie. So we do want to also hear from you too, and the aim is that we will get to those at the end of this session. So please do pop them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And just a reminder to keep yourself on mute, please, as that can be quite distracting for others that are trying to hear. Now, the reason that we are so interested in waste here at the Construction Sector Accord and right across construction is that it is a really significant issue and there is increasing focus. So as a construction sector here in New Zealand, we are estimated to be the largest contributor to landfill of any sector in New Zealand, and potentially even more so than household and commercial rubbish combined. So as waste is a really visible representation of inefficiency and carbon in our sector, we want to be very, very careful around how we are seen. So there's a focus on carbon, obviously, at the moment, and emissions and waste. And as this focus grows, it could have the potential to become our Achilles heel. So as an industry, we definitely don't want to be seen or to be a polluter or a dirty industry. So with this potential reputational risk for us as a sector, we are very, very interested in moving towards a zero waste industry. So this also presents us quite a big opportunity as well, because actually as we reduce waste, we also reduce our carbon, we reduce our emissions, we reduce our material use and our costs to build. And alongside that, our productivity increases. So as waste involves all of us right across the sector, doesn't matter where you are in the supply chain, we appeal to you to actually think about how you can actually start to make changes in your business. And that's one of the reasons why we've done this work with Naylor Love and with Annie, and to showcase some of the fantastic work that's actually happening in the sector. Because if you think about it, if you're a client, what do you require in your contracts? What kind of efficiencies are you asking? What kind of waste reduction measures? As a designer, do you measure how efficient your design is with regard to your material selection and how it's used? If you're a quantity surveyor, what kind of percent wastage factor are you applying? Do you have a feedback loop to see how much you're using? And our ideal is actually to obviously design out waste at a root cause level, but as an industry, we're not there yet. So on our sites today, we are dealing with the kinds of situation that Naylor Love have got here at AUT in Albany. And as a result, we're working with some of the downstream effects that result in on-site waste. So this is really the current world situation. We fully recognise this isn't where we want to be, and hopefully, you know, in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months, we'll be having conversations further up the line. But as a result of this being how we have to deal with the situation today, what we'd like to do is have a chat about Naylor Love and their actions on the site. They've done so much. It involves clients, specifiers, product suppliers, subcontractors, recycling, reuse, return logistics, getting resources back to manufacturers, developing a whole micro-credential for industry to use, even development of a furnishing protector mat that was made from old high-vis gear. And they've even looked into importation of a reusable cable tie. And this has mainly been the action of one amazing person who we are very, very grateful to have spending time with us today. And why has Annie done this? It's because alongside Naylor Love, she understands that waste is a resource and it's not rubbish. And so in diverting 91% of their waste into resource, they've also managed to cut 40% off their operational waste costs. So now over to Annie. And for a first question, Annie, how did you manage to get Naylor Love on board with undertaking this trial?
Oh, firstly, thank you for that huge introduction, Jen, and thanks for having me on this webinar. That's great. Naylor's management and a governance board right into sustainability. We've got business plans and so forth. So this trial, when it came up, was really good for us to get involved in. Yep. So we have full support from the management.
Excellent, excellent. And what, from the work that you've undertaken, what do you think has been the most worthwhile outcome as a result of this trial?
Okay, so the first thing is we've kept the site tidy. That was one of the comments from our project manager, Billy, on site. He's seen a considerably tidy site over the trial period, which was great. We've managed to upskill the labourers and in the community, so that's been really good as well. And we've even managed to, as you said, have a look at the materials that we've been using and influence recycle schemes here and there. So that's been really good as well.
Amazing. Yeah, you've definitely covered the whole gamut of the supply chain, I think, within this one project. But in saying that, what part did you find the most difficult?
I think it was setting up the site. We had to wait for the right project to come along before we could undertake the study, which meant the right project team as well, to actually make it a really good success. Yeah, that's probably the main things. Changing people's attitudes was also one of the items that we knew that we needed to undertake from all areas. Yeah.
Yeah, was anyone in particular or any kind of particular part of the supply chain harder to get on board than others?
I think the subcontractors, although we wrote it into their subcontractor agreements, we weren't police at the end of the day. So if they carried out their contract fully, then that was okay. But if they didn't, we still cleaned up after them, which is a typical construction job. As the labourers come through, clean up the floors, and that's it. But we actually started pushing back on some of the subcontractors and asking them, look, can you deal with this waste, and where is it going? Yeah, so there was a few breakthroughs doing it that way. It's all part of forming partnerships with the people that are on site and who you're working with.
That's cool. So yeah, I guess you would have found quite a few areas that that you could improve on, or things that you could see you could do differently. Could you outline a couple of those for us about next time when you're setting up a site, about the things that from what you've learned that you would do differently next time?
Yeah, we've got a couple here. We had a huge problem with polystyrene on our site. So the first thing is we'd reinforce the accuracy of materials being ordered, which brings us into lean construction, and that's what we should be following. Ask for shop drawings. Yeah, there's kind of a bit of an IT in there, but if we ask for shop drawings, then we know that it's they're going to cut in the shop. This for polystyrene, for instance, they'll cut the polystyrene to the right sizes and bring it out to site, and not just bring blocks out to site. And then we cut them on site, which causes an environmental issues in itself. And then finding the manufacturer to actually will take it back as well, which we didn't know at the start. Signing subs up to sort out their own waste was a bit hit and miss. Some subs took it upon themselves to actually do that, some didn't, but there were a few breakthroughs at the end of the day. Great work by our foundation guys that stripped all the formwork off, denailed it and took it to the next job. Previous projects I've been on, we've been left with half the formwork, which is rubbish at the end because the formwork is contaminated with concrete. And then we've learned to strategize how we're moving waste around site. It's like something that you don't even think about. We've got waste on level 4 and we've got our bins outside, 20 meters away from the building. How are we going to get it there? So the laborers, our resource sorters actually came up with the idea of going up and collecting one waste stream at a time and bringing it down and filling that one bin up. So that was working a lot better than one bin, everything, bringing it down and then sorting it at the sort centre. Yeah.
Oh wow, so it's quite interesting that the work up front was actually creating less work later on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then of taking that one step further, we've got other sites around Auckland that have the subcontractors have got designated waste bins at their workface. So that's starting to work well as well. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Sounds like you've actually innovated quite a lot, even, throughout the process from when you've started, to the end. And so this is fantastic because it plays right into my colleague, Jane Henley, who is our transformation lead for innovation, digital and modern methods of construction. So she's got a few questions she'd like to ask you too, Annie.
Okay.
Hi, Annie.
Hi, Jane.
Just thinking, I understand this is a CLT project, so really interested in just describing a little bit about what that is, and if, like, Naylor's obviously has a bunch of projects, so do you think that this different type of build method and different type of material has actually been fundamental in the waste reduction? Or tell us a little bit about the use of CLT. That'd be great.
Okay. CLT, timber. So the whole project at AUT, if you've seen photos, is timber structure. Totally different to work with than a concrete structure or a steel structure. Now, there's a lot less volume of weight in waste actually on site. So it's all pre-planned in the shop and it's made off-site, brought onto site, and then we raise it and bolt it in place, kind of like a structural steel element, but we're using timber. So this is really good for less waste, but then the alternative is we're using concrete and we have concrete waste. We have the volume and the weight there. So some of our sites are actually getting really good waste avoidance records because the concrete is heavier, and AUT are actually doing above and beyond to keep their 90% waste by weight diversion from landfill, because they're not actually producing any waste in the structure. Yeah, so that was quite interesting to actually think through that process. With timber, Jane, we also have a lot of time gains and less cost for labour. So time gains are when you're doing concrete construction, you're also doing the formwork, and then you're pouring, and then you're curing, whereas concrete straight up, and then you're starting to land the floor cassettes. Yeah. Yep.
Can you compare the CLT to stick build, or you're comparing it to concrete? Like, overall, is there, like, how do you compare it? You're saying it's better, faster for time. A lot more work happens in the design thinking, minimizing waste during that process. Is there any kind of direct comparison you can make, as in benefits?
Benefits is obviously less waste on our construction site. I don't know about the waste that is in the manufacturing side. I'm not sure about that, but I do know that they do shop plans. So if they're having a column, 3 meter column, and they're cutting it out of a 3.4, they've got 0.4 to manufacture something else out of for a site component. Yeah. So that brings us back to the IT and the shop drawings and measuring and placing the used or the unused materials into other components.
Yeah. A slight aside, jumping over to Graham's area a little bit, just on the CLT. Do you think that you're going to do more of it? Has there been a lot of satisfaction on site using it? I mean, is it something that the teams like to use on site?
That's a really good question. I know, I think every company that started working with timber has had the ups and downs, but we're learning as we go. The structure goes up really fast, and well, that's a huge positive. We just need to keep the rain away. And then, it even when you're standing out on site, it even smells different from standing out on a concrete or a steel site, I think there should be a lot more buildings that are built out of timber. So the CLTs, the LVLs, the industry is there, it's out there. We just need to learn how to build with it. And then, there's the whole carbon side as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Oh, thanks for that, Annie. I'll hand back to you, Jen.
Sure thing. And next up, we've got Graham, who is our people person at the Accord. So Graham is responsible for helping transform the sector regarding people in terms of skills, competency, diversity, bringing on the new wave of constructors, as well as helping educate us, those of us who have been in here for a long time. So Graham, yeah, any questions for Annie?
Had to happen, didn't it? Hi, Annie. Look, really interesting project, and quite a mind change for most people on site. What did you find were the biggest barriers, and as far as the people side of things and changing those attitudes?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Graham. I think there's the Naylor Love team which were already wanting to do the project, so that was really good. They were all on board and pushing. The labourers, it was once we sat down with them and we took them through the waste resource sorters course, and they learnt why they were doing what they were doing with changing their techniques and learning about waste. They then got it. It was like a light bulb going off in their mind. It's like, oh yeah. So they've then gone home and they are using their new skills in their home and in their community, which is so wonderful to hear. That's great. And then the subcontractors, what we've tried to do is not just tell them, like, write it into their subcontractors agreement and say, yeah, this is what you must do. Okay, everybody does that. It's a hit and miss. And we haven't tried to go, you must do step 1, 2, and 3, because that is like telling people. But what we're trying to do is educate and give them knowledge so that they can change what they're doing in their processes on site. It comes down. It even comes down to the project team as well, the design team, where we've asked to delete the curing blankets, because that's going to give us a whole lot of waste at the end of the day, and cure via an acron or water or something like that. So it's a whole team approach, and I think the barriers are being broken down. I think actually there's a report out from SBN. I think about 80% of people actually want to do the right thing, and I think how we've set up our site with the waste bins and the signage, they actually feel comfortable using that now. It's good.
So you mentioned the subcontractors, and as we know, they're responsible for at least 80% of the work on the average site. So do you think the learnings on this site and the methodologies will be transferred to other sites, or do you and how transferable are these skills? Are we going to see some consistency, or do you think we're going to see a continual confusion around different performance requirements or different operating models from site to site?
I know what you mean, Graham. What we do on our site, and then they go to another site and that's not quite the same thing, so they go back to their ways. I'd hope to think that although we've just started on our journey, that other contractors are starting on their journey as well and implementing environmental aspects into their projects. So like just with the resource sorters, we've got a resource sorter on our site one day, which will go to another company's site tomorrow. We'll be able to take their same training, and we've built in leadership to them. They're the ones that are going to be connecting with the subcontractors and everybody else as they are tidying up the sites and just saying, hey, look, what about this? Have you done this? Can you take this home?
So are those resource sorters, are they Naylor Love employees, or are they part of the supply chain? Are they from a labour hire company or something like that?
Yeah, they are part of the labour hire company. So our two labourers are from New Zealand Labour Exchange, and yeah, what we've done is we've brought a independent facilitator on board to deliver the resource sorters construction, micro-credential it is. It's an equivalency course to level 2 and 5 points. So yeah, we've developed it, and we've got an independent facilitator. Yeah, yeah. So hopefully that's going to change the whole industry, because it's the labourers, the resource sorters that are actually the end. You know, they're having to clean up after us, which is, you know, not good.
So, I mean, that brings up an interesting point, because if even the labourers on site are kind of part of an independent part of the supply chain, you've got, you know, huge diversity on any site, and you've got various employers, and you know, yeah, we are often accused of being a fragmented industry. So how do you find, what did you find with the messages that people responded to best, and you know, what do you do to get that consistent approach across the site?
Communication was good. We had, with the resource sorters and the whole site, actually, we designed a site board which showed everybody what our waste diversion rate was in percentage. Kept everybody up to date monthly as to how we're tracking, so that was really good. Communication is a thing, eh? It's and it's a knowledge-based communication. It's not a directive. Everybody's got to come to their own through their own processes to understand environmental management and waste management. Yeah, and what we can do is just help them along their journey.
And did you find that when you're talking about communication, I mean, there's often people on site, English is a second language. Did you have to translate into different languages, or find any other means of getting the message across?
We didn't on AUT. English was the only language that was used on the waste signs, but we have got another site that has got Mari English and Tagalong, which is a Philippine language. Yeah, so yeah, and yeah, bilingual language signs will be rolling out from Naylor Love. Yeah, from there on. Yeah, so
awesome, great to hear.
Yes, all inclusive. Yeah.
I think that's it from me. Back to you, Jen.
Excellent. And just to let everybody know, they're great questions, by the way, Graham. And Naylor Love and Annie have very kindly allowed everyone in the sector to access the resource sort of qualification. I've seen it. It looks really, really good. It helps explain people what to actually do on site. And I think Annie, we're using some of the video as an induction process for the people, even if they're not going to become a resource sorter, but for the subbies and the like that are actually on site, to actually help understand the process as it goes through. So that is available, and our lovely Jen Tyson has popped that into the chat. So if you want to have a look at that. Also, the site board that got mentioned there is visible in the video. So if you haven't checked that out yet, I would suggest doing that, and we can probably get a better version of it too. So if you missed it in a glimpse, I'm sure we can get a photo to show you how Naylor Love were using that to communicate to everybody on site about the amount that was being diverted. And also, we seem to have a really shy group today. I'm not sure if it's 3 o'clock or if everyone needs a coffee, but please do pop questions into the chat because we would love to hear from you. But at the moment now, over to Alison, and Alison is our expert on all things procurement. She's had a great background in Toyota, so got great industry experience and also government experience at Ministry of Education. So there's some questions that I know that Alison would love to talk to you, Annie, about contracts and the way that we can procure better as an industry. So over to you, Alison.
Thanks, Jen. And Annie and everyone, apologies, I was a little bit late getting online today because I'm over at the NZIQS conference. So if it's a little bit noisy when I'm on mic, I apologise. And it's beautiful sunny day here in Hamilton. So it looks like I'm being fried at the moment, I think, based on what I can see of my own video, but trying to find a spot which has got a plug and I can get Wi-Fi and I can get on screen is my excuses really. Annie, now I loved the video that Naylor Love produced as part of the Beacon, and I did comment on it on LinkedIn in terms of what piqued my interest was in the video it talks about not only was it working towards some of those environmental sustainability requirements and reducing waste, but there was a real cost saving in there as well. So being a buyer and looking at value in terms of how we maximize that for the project really piqued my interest. But I might come back to that in a second, but I wanted to start with a question in terms of actually when you were working with the client. So when you were working with the client, what was the conversation that started between Naylor Love and the client in terms of what they were looking to achieve and how that could be delivered? I'm just really interested in the thinking process and that engagement with the client in terms of actually what you were looking to deliver and how that could be approached, just some of your learnings and how that happened really.
Okay, so I wasn't there at the beginning of the contract, Alison, but I understand from the project manager and others that AUT wrote into the contract that we had to divert 90% of waste by weight to landfill. So that was upfront right at the beginning when we were tendering. Which is awesome, really. If all the clients wrote this into their contracts, then yeah, we'd be getting it a lot further down the track than what we are today. I think it just makes you re-evaluate and understand exactly how you're going to do it, and yeah, what your priorities are around waste.
Do you know with AUT at the time whether that they'd done any research or thinking around? I know you weren't involved in the actual time, but had they done anything which helped them to inform that target of 90%, or had they done any market engagement, or was it just a requirement and they were looking to see what the market could deliver against?
I couldn't answer that question, Alison, but I do know that you know, AUT have done an amazing job with their design. It is, you know, a very good environmental design of their project. So yeah, contractually, I'm not too sure where they started there.
And I think your comment around them setting the 90% target or setting something that was quite directive from the client was really useful. I think that's a lot of questions that I get back around some of the broader outcomes which government has set as part of public sector requirements and contracts. Part of those broader outcomes being around sort of waste reduction and sustainability, etc. The questions come from both clients and sort of suppliers in terms of actually, how do you build that into contracts? What is the targets, or what requirements do you set? And then from suppliers, how do they respond? Often they get quite generic requirements that they're looking for increased waste reduction, or how would they reduce the carbon on a project? And they can be quite broad statements from clients. So I think what you were saying about having a specific target really helped to focus the attention and the solutions that Naylor Love worked on.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it was good. 90% is quite higher than even Naylor Love's KPI in our region, and it's even, I think it's even higher than the Green Star credits. I think they're running at 80% or 70%, 80%. Yeah, so this was like you know, a stretch goal really for the whole industry to achieve. So yeah, we're in there, we're hanging on to it, which is really good. And you know, the best thing with our trial is that although we trialed from October, November and December, 3 months, which was the foundations right up to the start of the structure, the guys on site have taken upon themselves to keep going. You know, so Mark from Auckland Council and myself have decamped from site every time we go back with a whole lot of people to show around, they are still going strong. Yeah, month after month. It's great.
Great. And now the other question I wanted to ask you, and this is always a challenge I get from the sector, is should the requirements for waste reduction be built into contract terms or into the specification, so the requirements? So I'm just interested in your view where you think it's better placed, and if you don't have a view, that's fine as well, but should be a part of the scope and requirements, or should it be a target driven contractual requirement?
Okay, I haven't really thought about that, Alison, but like from my point of view, we can only build what's on the plans and what is specified. So if the architect or whoever is doing the specification can, do the little life cycle assessments, can research into the cradle to cradle, so it's not a linear product that we're actually using, then we've got some chance of actually getting the 90%.
So what you're saying, it's everybody that has to play a part, in terms of designer, the client, the actual contractor and sub-trades actually all have to work together to be part of that solution, and it's building into that approach. I think from my personal view, I always advocate for it being part of the scope and the specification, because it should be about delivering the requirement. So, but that's my view. I do want to bring you to that cost question now, and what really piqued my interest in terms of the savings that you said that that had been made through the project. Do you think this is an approach that other organisations, be they main contractor or subcontractors, could build in as an example in terms of how they work generally, regardless of what the client is requiring or specifying? Is it a new approach to actually this is the norm?
From our trial, we didn't realise that we were going to save that much. Because we've quantified the volume before, but we've never quantified the value of waste, and it wasn't because the trial we actually managed to get a QS estimator, Michelle, on board to run the waste stats for us, which was so good. It was really an eye opener. So over that period, there was like $39,000 we would have spent on waste if all the waste was going into a 9-cube bin, and we were just sending that 9-cube bin off. But since we got the polystyrene taken back by the manufacturer, and we're getting credit for our steel bin, it was cost us only $14,000. So 40% we saved. It's an eye opener, and for us to now go back out to even our Naylor Love people and say, hey, look, we are doing the right thing. It is proven. Like, it might be different, a little bit different on each site. Everybody's got different products. But at the end of the day, we still saved quite a bit, and there is money in waste to save.
Yeah, I was really encouraged by the approach you took, really around that assessment and actually measuring it. So I know it was part of a pilot and you were trialing it, but not only the volume, but actually the challenges around people and the cost savings, because I think that's one thing that clients are often asked is who's going to pay? Who's going to pay for these increased requirements in terms of
the levies?
The levies or the actual resources to operate a slightly different mechanism. But I think you've shown as an example, although there may be some more costs in terms of sorting or the facilitation, or some costs in terms of training or educating, actually the payout is worth it, because at the end of the day, you're doing the right thing, you're reducing waste, and it's actually saving money. So
So what we've done is we're going to be taking when we get some downtime, we're going to be taking our study of the values and the cost savings back to our pre-con team, and asking them to develop some kind of schedule to for the P&G costs for waste, because we should be able to narrow that down quite a bit more accurately as to the materials that we're using on site to construct. And we know we've got our waste partnerships list. We know how much it's going to cost us to send waste away or receive credits for like the sale of steel and so forth. So yeah, hopefully our P&G might come down a little bit. That'd be good for the old clients.
No, and I suppose, Jen, you did mention at the start I'd worked for a car manufacturer, and I think for those of that you've heard me talk on some occasions, I talk about their approach to waste minimization, which actually leads to productivity and increased cost. As a business, even back in those days, it maybe wasn't necessarily for those sustainability agendas. It was actually about how to be more productive, how to I'm really strong on the principles around waste management, and can actually serve multiple means, not only the sustainability goal, but also in terms of increased productivity, which comes back to Jane's, some of your points. And if there was one message that you would give to clients or main contractors out there in terms of a sales pitch to actually to look at this as an opportunity, what would you say to them?
I'd say definitely try it. Definitely take time out at the beginning, get around the table, and actually understand what materials you are constructing with. Complete your site waste management plan. Understand your waste partnerships and who can take what waste away. Talk with your subcontractors, and it's a whole team thing. It's not, no one person can do this by themselves. No one business can make a difference. It's everybody, and if everybody starts doing what we're doing, then the costs are going to be even less for the contractors and everybody. It's like a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I was on site, and I looked in the general bin and there was stove buckets. That's exterior plaster. It's like I walked up to the subcontractor and I said, why are they in our general waste? And they said, oh yeah, we just put them there. I said, well, can you not take them back to Stowe? And they said, yeah, you can. So I said, rightio, get them out. So I got hold of Stowe, and he goes, oh yeah, we take them back. I'm going, well, does anybody know that you take these buckets back? It was like communication from the manufacturers out to the subcontractors that are buying the product. There's a whole link there that needs to be discovered. So if we're all in the pot and we're all doing our little thing, then we're going to get better and better at it.
I love that example, Annie, and just that one example of finding a waste product, those buckets in the bin, and actually following the chain back, and actually seeing that there's a missed opportunity for that manufacturer and that subby to just take ownership and do something in that piece. So it's a good challenge or good opportunity back to the sector. Thanks, Annie. Love the work you've been doing and love your enthusiasm. Jen, back to you.
Yeah, some great thought-provoking concepts sitting in there, Annie and Alison. Thank you for those very in-depth questions. And it does start to get us thinking about moving away from saying the waste is rubbish into more of the resource, and realizing that there is money. And no, like the to think about it in terms of your scrap metal, no one ever sits there and goes, look at that pile of rubbish. And so we need to start actually altering the way that we view any of these materials that we see on site. And as we know that resources are finite, we know that waste levies in time will go up. We know that labour costs are always increasing. We know that we have to actually transport this material there. And so the fact is that the more that we obviously bring down the waste level, then we're obviously going to have benefits to the bottom line, and increasing costs of building and scarcity of materials as well, and actually using them much more efficiently. So that was interesting, Annie, your talk about the shop drawings and how useful that would be, if that was actually required in people's procurement, that actually show how efficient you're being with the order of materials that you're getting, and putting that kind of thing back into the feedback loop. Now I've got a question here, which is, are we aware of whether there were other broader outcome requirements on the project, such as employment and training outcomes, supplier diversity, to manage on top of the waste target, or were effectively these outcomes specifically focused just on the waste initiative?
So I don't know contractually if there was any broader outcomes in the contract. I was just there, immersed myself in the team and for the waste trial. Yeah.
Yes, and certainly you definitely delivered a lot of broader outcomes as a result of that. You know, because
we have.
Yeah, because you mean you didn't need to, you know, make that micro credential, you didn't need to make it available to the industry. And I know that when we've talked previously as well, Annie, that you've spoken about the fact that you've now got those resource sorters trained, and so you're looking at working with new people on each site to keep, you know, I guess raising the standard of, you know, labourers coming up into resource sorters, and actually starting to show a bit of a pathway so that other teams and other companies can also share and having, you know, better skilled resources.
Yeah, we're just starting to train our foremen now, going through the same course. Our foreman Wazaki was an amazing guy on AUT. He looked after the resource sorters. He tracked all the waste going out with the Repre forms, took photos of them, loaded them in so that we could complete the stats. Yeah, so huge learning curve for him as well. It's such a different role in his project work than just doing other normal tasks. Yeah, so hats off to him. He did really well.
Yeah, thinking, you know, for the benefit of people online, would you like to take a minute or so just to explain the course and how you undertook the training, you know, what the module actually contains?
Okay, so it's a 4-hour course in the classroom where the resource sorters will learn what materials, where they can go, the sorting of them, the waste hierarchy, and so they have a good old chat about that, and then they have a 40-hour workbook to get through. So they're sent out onto sites, and this is where we want to push from the bottom up to the top. So we're starting with the resource sorters at the bottom, and we're actually getting their supervisors to sign off their work. So yeah, it's a push from the bottom up to the top to get all the sites actually conforming to better waste management systems. Yeah, so they do 40 hours on site, signed off by their site supervisor. They have Semi, who's the facilitator, do welfare checks on them and make sure that they're all on board and getting into the sites that they need to get into. And then once they're all through, then there's going to be a certification ceremony, and they're going to be awarded their certificates. So yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
I think this is it's good because we're actually spending time with our resource sorters and upskilling them. Like they're the ones that are helping us out the most there on site. It's not the subcontractors and our Naylor Love personnel. We're there to help, but the mahi is coming from the resource sorters, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, and you've spoken about the pride, you know, as well, that's coming with that too.
Oh yeah. There was a story there. I was there just after Easter weekend, and the resource sorter that we had there the week before took an extra day off, and he came back and he said, "Oh no, my area is just so messed up," and he just took so much pride in re-cleaning it up and putting things where they should do it. Yeah, it was good to see. Yeah, they're taking pride. They want to do it. Yeah, that's great.
It's amazing. And having seen your site firsthand, I will concur that it is one of the tidiest ones I've ever seen, right? It's just everything having a place. Yeah, and keeping it moving as well. Once you get to a certain full state for a certain thing like your cardboard, making certain those items are picked up, which brings us into a really good question that's just come through on the chat, which is, do you think the approach for each site will be determined by the infrastructure and capability of waste providers in the regional areas?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, what we can do in Auckland, you could probably do the same in Christchurch. Wellington is struggling. but like when you do your site waste management plan and you break down all the waste elements that you have on site, every region has a steel contractor, that you can get money from. Everybody's got a cardboard bin. Everybody's got a general waste. Most of them have chipboard recovery. Most of them have timber recovery. So the industry is slowly getting there. I think our training and what we're doing is surpassing what is out there at the moment for us, but we just need to push for more people or more businesses to come online and help us with the recycling, or change our methodologies to suit that certain region.
Yeah, I agree, and it's definitely a game of two halves. Like Auckland's resource recycling market is much different from the rest of the country, like you've identified, but there are certain commonalities right throughout the country. And from discussions with some of the recycling markets, it becomes chicken and egg, because they need enough people to be getting them the raw material to actually make it cost effective, and yet then that we can't actually get it because there's no one recycling it. And so you're right, it becomes a game of economics and actually getting enough significant flow through the system.
Even I have problems myself up here with the volume of waste. One waste provider will take 1 cube at a time, and it's like, it will take me 3 sites to get 1 cube of the one material to recycle back. So I'm not a junkyard, and I can't hold materials over and store them, unfortunately. It's a gather here and send to there type thing.
Oh, that leads in really nicely to a question that we've received through the chat as well, about the role of territorial authorities in supporting avoidance and diversion of C&D waste. Now, in particular, this trial was done in line with Auckland Council. So, what do you see the role for other territorial authorities? What could they be doing?
That's a really good question. And if you, Naylor Love is next business plan for this coming year is for us all to go and knock on the council's doors and just talk about waste and where it's going, and the waste minimisation fund and what we can do and so forth. There needs to be a partner between the council in that region and the contractor, and they need to actually understand what's missing in that region. I know we've got our our environmental managers in each region now, and they're all contacting their own regional councils with an understanding of how can we both help each other. So that's really good. If there's more construction companies out there that want to talk to their councils as well, then it's the start of a big conversation that everybody is going to have, and it's start of an action plan, I think.
I agree. And the collective attitude too, right? So the fact is that more of we can do this as an industry as well, and then it can actually save. We can get a lot more bang for our buck by having that synergy.
Well, for sure. And it's like I have to say thanks very much to Mark Roberts from Auckland City Council. It was amazing through this trial. He was on site with me every day during the trial period, and we sat there and we actually took the time out to actually see why the waste was being created, how it got to site, why it wasn't leaving site, and what was missing from the whole process. So without Mark and the waste minimisation funding from Auckland Council, we would not be where we are today. We would have got there, but not today.
Yeah, and in particular, I guess it does show flexibility on some of these sites too, because working with Mark, you managed to get the ability to do some curbside recycling for some of the more usual suspects, didn't you? Yeah, sure.
So 1, 2s and 5s. You have no idea the amount of plastic bottles that the subcontractors, all the personnel on site drink. Oh, there's a lot. Like every fortnight, there's two 40-litre bins full And I suppose we've only got about, I don't know, 40, 50 people on site at AUT at the moment. It's ridiculous. It's like, yeah. So anyway, bit of change management there, and maybe fill the bottle up with water or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, Mark, Auckland City Council, yeah, they collected our recycle bin, so that's good. Hopefully that paves the way for other construction companies to put their own recycle bins out at curbside as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we, as an industry, may have some better, a better basis to work on that too, as each of the regional councils is now starting to get their own emissions plans together, and they're starting to realise what a big issue waste is, you know, and they obviously have you know, the ability to help us in reducing and hopefully getting enough flow through their systems too, to help, because it doesn't make sense to redevelop the same system. You know, that's a waste of resource in a whole different kind of manner. Now, another question we've got is about, were lean construction practices adopted for waste reduction? And if so, how is lean linked with sustainability? So Annie, I might let you have a go first, and then Alison, this is kind of playing into your home territory. This is going to blindside you. So yeah, if we could get from Annie and then Alison.
So through trial, nothing lean about it. We just dealt with what was contractual, but we then halfway through the trial thought, yeah, we've got to do something better here. So some principles coming out of our trial were, you know, measure twice and cut once, you know, buying the right product, like you know, a corridor of 1,300 wide, and you're buying 2.4 sheets of jibboard. Why don't you purchase 2.6 sheets of jibboard and cut it in half? That type of thing. Yeah, so lean construction wasn't really thought about at the beginning of the trial. We just wanted a true trial of what waste was happening on site. Yeah, but our learnings have been, you know, subsequent to that. Alison, I'll leave you to finish that question off.
Jane, I reckon this is more your question than mine, but I'll have an attempt, and then you can fill the gaps. But look, lean manufacturing, when I was working in that manufacturing kind of sector, was all around everything from how you designed, how the quality to ensure that you right down through the supply chain, that you minimized waste all the way through the supply chain, the actual on time and delivery to site, and then how it was used, and then actually ensuring that the manufacturing processes were as streamlined and energy efficient. So that's from the resources you were using, whether that was robotic or personnel, was as time effective and minimize the use of resources, so that as you actually got to the end and the delivery. And I think that does flow over into the construction process, everything from that design, in terms of looking at the design process, the products and how it comes together, and then how it comes to site and actually fits. And Annie, I think you hit the nail on the head. Car manufacturers didn't do it alone, they did it with the supply chain. So it has to be a whole collaboration from the idea and the investment all the way through the design, that planning, that construction process, to actually ensure you minimize inefficiency and increase productivity. That's the principles. And Jane, that's my generic answer. I'll let you talk from anything else that the construction sector tools or areas that that you would like to touch on.
Sure, I can jump in. I mean, I feel like the word lean and the lean thinking is definitely starting to come through in the offsite manufacturing space. But what I've heard Annie say, and where this links here is, and you said it too, Alison, it's not just what one company does, it's how everybody is working together. And so what I'm sort of seeing in terms of lean thinking is how we think from design through to use and changing our mindsets. And it was great to hear your examples of like lean thinking for your piece. But I think where we're really challenged with lean thinking, and I know KO are, you know, doing a lot of that at the moment, is how do you drive lean across multiple businesses what sort of different contracts do we need? I mean, you talked about the real driver for this project was the contract and a 90% target. If that hadn't have been there, and they weren't thinking, you know, what do we drive from that top-down perspective, and then it's your responsibility to drive it from the bottom up, then that wouldn't have happened, right? So the lean thinking, then just apply that to the design. How did that come into the design phase? You know, who were the architects, and, you know, what sort of BIM modeling did they use in their planning of the CLT? Did they schedule the sizes of the CLT sheets into the, you know, into what they actually designed? And so it really goes quite deep. If we want to go, you know, it's kind of like deep green and light green, you know, deep lean and light lean. I feel like there's similar approaches with lean in construction, just depending how far along chain we can influence. I mean, that's just kind of what I've been seeing.
Yeah, I'd agree with you completely, Jane. I think our end game is that deep lean and green, in terms of actually, when we are really interested in those root causes of waste. And I mean, I know that Annie has also done, you know, even though we're effectively, this has been ambulance at the bottom of the cliff for, you know, in some ways, because we're actually talking about diverting waste that's already occurred. Some of those actions that Annie has been taking and that us as an industry are looking at too is further up the supply chain about how we can actually design out the waste. And so Annie, have you, for one final thing, what is something that you would like to everybody to leave this webinar to take action on?
Okay, I've had a thought about this. So I think if everybody could tomorrow go out to their waste bin and have a look in it. All right, I think you'd be really surprised about what's actually in there. The next thing is look for partnerships and share your information. We've started a hashtag waste shakedown. Please add to it. We're sharing all our information. Please share your information. That's how we're going to get ahead, right? I don't want anybody struggling as what Naylor Love did at the start and redoing the process when, you know, we've already found a lot of stuff out that could save you a lot of time. Just like to thank everybody that was in the trial and the ongoing success of the trial. That was up to the project team when Mark and I left. So a big thumbs up to those guys. It is a tricky build because, as I was mentioned before, it's out of timber, so the weight of the materials is gone. If it was a construction of concrete and steel, then I'd say they'd easily keep to over 90% waste by weight. And the other thing, there's a real big thanks to AUT for their approach to designing a sustainable building. It is pretty market transforming, and to be able to complete this project with AUT and is really good. And yeah, hopefully there's more clients out there that are designing more sustainably. That'd be really good.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Annie. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to you and to Naylor Love for being so open with your information, you know, including financial information, and for recognizing that, yeah, we actually have to tackle this as an industry, and for sharing those ideas. So if you haven't watched the video or read the case study or the how-to, because Annie's been very generous with your knowledge, do check it out, please. The links are in the chat. And really the work done by Annie and Naylor Love on the site at AUT is the reality of us as an industry taking our first steps towards zero waste and reduced carbon. So ideally, yep, that waste wouldn't have been there to divert, you know, as this is obviously at the lower levels of the waste hierarchy, but the fact is it is there. And so we want to work alongside industry, including Naylor Love, to identify and eliminate these root causes of waste. But obviously we have got waste on site, and you know, due to errors and everything else, there will always be some aspect. So in effect, we, no matter what happens, we still all have to be on this journey and to make sure we have got an afterlife, if you like, for our products and materials. So we are also going to be assisting at the Construction Sector Accord of collating this information. So from the likes of Annie, and if you've got other insights, we'd love to hear from you. We want to make it available for all industry, and we're delighted that our commercial partners are being so generous with what is technically their IP. So if you do want to work with us or you're interested in this, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'd love to hear from you. And we'd like to thank you for your time today and for having interest in zero waste construction and being part of the solution. So again, thanks to you all, and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Okay,
Thanks.
Takiti.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Annie.